Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, House Bill HB 4545, Frequently Asked Questions for Parents. It is our pleasure to welcome you today, and again, we appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to join us to receive this great information. My name is Gracie Whitley, and I'm with Region 10 Education Service Center, and I work with SPEDTEX, the Special Education Information Center. And we're going to go to the next slide, please. SPEDTEX is a Special Education Information Center for the state of Texas. We are a collaborative project between Region 10 Education Service Center and Texas Education Agency, TEA. Our role is to help parents understand their rights and responsibilities under IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and facilitate collaboration when there are concerns between the parent and the school district. And we also serve as a resource for educators. We offer support for families, educators, and stakeholders via phone, email, or live chat. And we also participate in webinars, as we are doing today with our partner, PRN, our collaborative partner, and we share resources. Next, we are going to hear from Stephanie from Partners Resource Network so that she can share some information with us about PRN. Next slide, please.
Hello and welcome. My name is Stephanie McLaughlin. I am the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. Partners Resource Network is the nonprofit agency that operates the Texas statewide network of parent training and information centers. We are funded through the Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. And throughout Texas, our projects are known as PACT, PATH, PEN, and TEAM. At Partners Resource Network, we strive to empower and support Texas families and individuals impacted by disabilities or special healthcare needs. We do this through a network of highly skilled, regionally located coordinators who are knowledgeable in local policies, services, and resources, as well as state and national level guidelines. We provide training, information, and one-on-one assistance to parents and youth. We serve parents of children and youth with disabilities from birth to age 26, as well as youth self-advocates between the ages of 14 and 26. All of our services are provided in both English and Spanish. And for more information, you can check out our website at prntexas.org and like and follow us on Facebook. And also joining me today with PRN is our Director of Statewide Services, Christina Henning. Thanks, Gracie.
You are welcome. Thank you, Stephanie and Partners Resource Network for being here. And also Katrina Mathis is here with us from Region 10, as well as Ashton Rowe. Ashton is our technology support person. So if you have any questions or concerns during the webinar with regard to technology, you are welcome to send Ashton Rowe a message via chat. Next slide, please. Today's presentation, as we mentioned earlier, is House Bill 4545, frequently asked questions our parents have shared with us. And from Texas Education Agency today, joining us is Leo Kaleo from our School Family Community Engagement. Also, along with him are our presenters, Jacob Klett and Lizette Barraza from TEA's Office of Special Populations and Monitoring, and Kobe Self from the Division of District Systems and Strategies at TEA. We welcome them on today. It is our pleasure to hand over the proverbial virtual microphone to Jacob so that he can get us started. Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks so much, Gracie. Let me just share my screen here. Is that coming through okay?
Yes.
It's not in presenter mode, so we can see some of the narrative at the bottom. There we go.
Got it? No.
It just reverted. Now. Looks good.
Good? All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon and for the opportunity to participate in this webinar regarding House Bill 4545 and accelerated instruction requirements. We will be addressing some frequently asked questions that the folks at SPEDTEX and Region 10 have provided us to help prepare for today's session. Most frequently asked questions received by families of students with disabilities who are served by special education, and we're excited by the opportunity to help address those today. I want to ground our work in the true north statement of our office, the Office of Special Populations and Monitoring at the Texas Education Agency. Together, we are committed to high expectations and strong systems that achieve equitable outcomes for every student with a disability. The work that we're going to be sharing today regarding accelerated instruction certainly is an effort to ensure that our students with disabilities have equitable access to these strong systems and that our schools have clarity around the provision of accelerated instruction and ensuring that students with disabilities are receiving the services through their IEP that they need, as well as any accelerated instruction that they may also be eligible to receive. As Gracie mentioned, my name is Jacob Klett. I'm the Director of Special Education Strategic Integration in the middle there on the slide. And I've had the pleasure to work with some colleagues that are also on the call today over the past 10 months or so after the passage of House Bill 4545 in supporting school districts and folks in the field around implementation. So I'll pass it over to my colleague Colby Self to introduce himself and to Liz Barraza as well. So Colby.
Thank you, Jacob. Again, my name is Colby Self. I'm happy to be here to present on House Bill 4545 overview. And I'm the Director of Texas Tutoring Supports. And we have a lot of information that parents don't always get to hear about 4545. So we hope to clarify any questions that may be lingering as we present today. Now I'll turn it over to Liz.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lizeth Barraza. I'm an education specialist here in the special education programs at TA, working with Jacob on this. We're excited to have you all here and teach you more about HB 4545. Lots to learn.
All right, thanks, Liz. Thanks, Colby. I'll actually, at this point, pass it over to Colby again to walk us through our agenda and then guide us through the first section of today's webinar. So Colby.
Thanks, Jacob. Today's presentation is going to include an overview of House Bill 4545. This bill was passed in the 87th Texas legislative session in spring of 2021. We will also review the requirements for accelerated instruction, supplemental accelerated instruction, and accelerated learning committees, as well as review answers to frequently asked questions from families of students served by special education. Objectives: we hope that through today's presentation, families of students served by special education can better understand the components of House Bill 4545 and how two key requirements, supplemental accelerated instruction and accelerated learning committees, apply to students served by special education. We will also address the most frequently asked questions about the requirements of House Bill 4545 and its implications for students served by special education. We'd first like to start by norming on some acronyms that you'll see throughout the presentation. So you'll hear these throughout the presentation today. AI is commonly used when referring to the general accelerated instruction requirements. SAI specifically refers to the supplemental accelerated instruction, one of the pathways to meet the AI accelerated instruction requirement, which we will learn about today. ALC refers to the General Accelerated Learning Committee, while ARD, which many of you probably recognize, refers to the Admissions, Review, and Dismissal Committee, specific to students who are served by special education. There's also the ALP, or Accelerated Learning Plan, which is a plan that delineates how accelerated instruction is delivered and sets parameters for that instruction. There is also the IEP, which is the Individualized Education Program, or the Individualized Learning Plan for students served by special education. So again, we're going to start with an overview of House Bill 4545, including its requirements and the processes school districts and public charters must follow by statute. Again, an overview, House Bill 4545 went into effect June of 2021. The bill sets new criteria for the existing accelerated instruction requirement for students who do not pass the previous school year STAAR. Therefore, accelerated instruction has been a longstanding requirement in Texas for any student who is not successful on their STAAR test. Out of the bill, we gain more clarity around accelerated instruction requirements, which includes meeting the requirements through the assignment of a student to a master teacher or by providing the student with supplemental instruction in the area they were not successful in STAAR. We also see a new component that requires schools to establish an accelerated learning committee, or ALC, to determine an accelerated learning plan that delineates the implementation of accelerated instruction for students who did not pass the 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading or math STAAR. Lastly, the bill eliminates grade retention and retesting requirements for students in 5th and 8th grade. So a little bit more in depth about the process. To determine the need for accelerated instruction, the question we must ask is whether the student in grades 3 through 12 performs satisfactorily on the STAAR. This also includes the EOC assessment and STAAR Alternate 2 assessments. If the answer is yes, no further action is required. If the answer is no, accelerated instruction is required. Now, with House Bill 4545, there are 2 pathways to meet the requirement. It may be met by assigning the student to a TIA designated teacher, which includes master, exemplary, or recognized designations in the subject area of the STAAR that the student scored in the does not meet or developing range, or by delivering supplemental accelerated instruction, which we're going to learn a little bit more about here shortly. Furthermore, with 4545, House Bill 4545, if the answer to the question, did the student take the 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading or math STAAR is yes, then an accelerated learning committee is required to create an accelerated learning plan. If a student served by special education did not pass the 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading or math STAAR test, the student's ARD committee will act as the accelerated learning committee and create the accelerated learning plan for the student. While House Bill 4545 provides the 2 options for school districts and public charter schools to provide accelerated instruction, including the assignment of a student to a TIA designated teacher, master, exemplary, or recognized, as we discussed before, there are only slightly more than 4,000 teachers across the state who meet this criteria. The main way school districts and charter schools meet the requirement for HB 4545 is through providing students with supplemental accelerated instruction. So a little bit about the pathway. All students have a right to accelerated instruction. House Bill 4545 provides the 2 possible pathways to meet this requirement. Supplemental accelerated instruction, as you can see on the slide, is an option for providing this to a student. Supplemental accelerated instruction is an element of the general education program available to all students through this state requirement. Supplemental accelerated instruction is not intended to meet the students' specially designed instructional requirements in their IEP. This is also true where the ARD committee is required to act as an accelerated learning committee for students who did not pass the 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade STAAR. So further about supplemental accelerated instruction, it is not a special education service and is provided in addition to instruction normally given to the student in the grade level which the student is enrolled. It must be provided fully in a subsequent summer or during the school year. If the student participates in supplementary accelerated instruction during the following school year of not passing a STAAR test, the instruction must not be scheduled in a way that removes the student from grade level content or enrichment classes, or during recess or physical activity that is available to other students who are in the same grade level. If the additional instruction was not provided fully during summer and requires the students to complete it during the school year, whether before, during, or after school, the student must receive that targeted instruction no less than once per week. House Bill 4545 also requires that supplementary accelerated instruction be provided for a minimum of 30 hours per subject area the student did not pass. The supplemental instruction must be delivered in a 1-to-1 ratio or in a small group with no more than 3 students. A larger group is permitted in cases where the parents of all students in that group have consented. Supplemental instruction must include targeted instruction in the essential knowledge and skills for the applicable grade levels and subject areas for the test the student did not pass. It must be designed to assist the student in achieving satisfactory performance in the applicable grade level and subject area, and must utilize effective instructional materials designed to supplement instruction. Lastly, supplemental instruction must be provided by a person trained in the materials being used for the supplemental instruction and under the oversight of the school district. To the extent possible, instruction is provided by one person for the entirety of the student's supplementary instructional period. These requirements apply across the board to any student that did not pass STAAR testing that is engaged in supplemental accelerated instruction to meet the accelerated instruction requirement, including students served by special education. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lizeth to take us through the accelerated learning committees.
Thanks, Colby. So as we heard, one of the requirements with this HB 4545 is to have an accelerated learning committee or an ALC, what we call it, based on the student's performance in reading and math in certain grade levels. And we can go to the next slide. So back to this decision matrix here, the first question we're asking is, did the student take that 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading or math STAAR? If they took that assessment and they did not pass that assessment, then accelerated learning, excuse me, is going to be required. Excuse me. So if the student is served by special education, then we run into having a requirement be met by giving the student an accelerated learning committee. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. For accelerated learning committees, there are some requirements here. So it's for students served by special education who didn't pass that 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade reading or math STAAR. The ART committee will act as the accelerated learning committee. The ART committee, acting as the ALC, must hold a properly constituted ARD to create the student's accelerated learning plan and delineate the way in which the student will participate in accelerated instruction. The plan must determine, again, the manner in which the student will participate in AI. Because the ALC is required to hold a properly constituted ART committee meeting, that meeting must include certain folks, and those folks include the principal of the school, as well as the general education teacher of the corresponding subject area that the student failed to perform well in. In the cases where the student is served by SPED and they do not meet the standards in the following year's STAAR, then the superintendent or their designee is then required to also make a part of the ALC meeting. The ALC must address the student's failure and adjust the learning plan to ensure that the student's success. Revisions to the student's ALP by the ALC must be documented in writing within the IEP as an attachment or within the deliberation section of that IEP, and should be provided to the parent as well. We can move on to the next slide. So in this slide, we have some just important reminders about AI as it relates to our kiddos being served in special education. Accelerated instruction is a state requirement for all students that didn't pass that STAAR, including students served by special education. Accelerated instruction and the accelerated learning plan are not a function of special education. That is, AI is not a disability-related service in the student's IEP. An ART committee that serves as an ALC to design an ALP should always consider the disability-related needs of the student as described in the IEP when creating these plans. And we can move on to the next slide.
All right, thanks, Liz. At this point, we're going to jump into the frequently asked questions section of this afternoon's webinar. And in this last section, we will answer some of the most frequently asked questions that our folks at SPEDTEX have received, specifically by parents and caregivers of students who are served by special education regarding the requirements of and the implementation of House Bill 4545. So one common question asks whether the supplemental instruction that you heard both Colby and Liz speak about earlier, does that supplemental instruction actually replace services in the student's IEP, for example, a service like resource? Just to reiterate, supplemental instruction is not a special education service, where a service provided to a student in a resource setting is required based on that student's presenting needs and described in the IEP. That's required to be provided to the student in order to provide that student with a free and appropriate public education. The minimum 30 hours per subject area for supplemental instruction is a state requirement for all students who are not successful on the STAAR. And it's important to note that what Colby had mentioned earlier, that 30 hours is really considered an extension of high quality tier 1 instruction that's provided to any student. So in the case where a student with a disability who is served in special education is required to receive accelerated instruction in a particular subject area, and the school has determined that the way that they're going to achieve that is through the delivery of supplemental instruction, then that 30 hours of required supplemental instruction is required to be provided to that student in addition to any services that student would already be entitled to receive as part of their IEP. The 30 hours, again, for supplemental instruction can be provided before, during, or after school, and also during the summer. So there are some options available to schools in terms of the way that they schedule those services and provide them to students. All right, so another common question asks, does the school have to hold an ARD committee meeting, or can this be done using an IEP amendment? And this question, to put a little bit of additional context on this, has to do with the Accelerated Learning Committee and the requirement in House Bill 4545 that ARD committees serve as that Accelerated Learning Committee for students with disabilities served in special education. So in answering this question, for students who were not successful or did not pass their STAAR assessment in 3rd, 5th, or 8th grade, under the requirements of House Bill 4545, that student's ARD committee is required to act as the ALC and is required to meet for this purpose. The ALC is required to convene and make decisions regarding that student's accelerated instruction program. Now, the ARD committee, when they're serving as that ALC or Accelerated Learning Committee, develops the plan and then provides that accelerated learning plan to the parent or the caregiver in writing. In cases where an ALC is not required to meet, so again, that ALC requirement applies in specific grade levels, 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade. In other circumstances where an ALC is not required to meet, an ARD committee may choose to use an amendment to document any decisions around accelerated learning for that student, provided that the parent or guardian of the student and the staff of the school can agree to those changes. Another common question asks whether ARD committees can waive the requirements of House Bill 4545 or whether they can modify those requirements in some way. And this is a great question. We do receive this one quite frequently. Now, just to kind of circle back to what Colby had said for the top of today's presentation, the requirements of House Bill 4545 apply to all students, and this does include our students who are served by special education. The requirements of 4545 are part of the Texas Education Code that applies to students across the state. ARD committees do have the responsibility, as we've mentioned a couple of times, to serve as the Accelerated Learning Committee for certain grade levels. ARD committees must always consider the individual needs of a student with a disability served by special education. And as they're considering those individual needs, the ARD committee should be determining whether certain adjustments may need to be provided to the may need to be made to the accelerated learning plan where appropriate. However, supplemental instruction, so that 30 hours per subject area that we've talked a little bit about today, where that's required, that should be provided to the student as specified under the requirements of House Bill 4545, including for students who are served by special education, unless the student's ARD committee has determined that in doing so, in some way, the provision of that accelerated instruction would somehow deny that student their right to a free and appropriate public education or a FAPE. And that's really a unique and individualized decision that an ARD committee would need to really discuss and consider. As has been mentioned earlier in today's presentation as well, students do have a right to receive accelerated instruction under Texas Education Code if they're not successful on the state assessment. This is an extension of the general education program that's available to all students. So similarly to any other subject area for our students served by special education, ARD committees should be considering ways in which they can effectively ensure that students' needs for a FAPE are met through the IEP, and that student has the ability to participate and access accelerated learning where and when that is required for that student. Another question that commonly comes up asks whether parents or caregivers of students can opt out of the requirements of House Bill 4545. And here it's important to note that accelerated instruction and any tutoring meant to meet the needs or meet the requirements of House Bill 4545 are subject to compulsory attendance requirements, and they are treated as any other instructional time would be treated during the school day. The statute doesn't provide much guidance in terms of what to do if a parent wishes to opt out of this requirement. However, generally, when a parent requests certain accommodations or exemptions from otherwise required instructional services, local school systems have mechanisms for handling these requests in the way that they have established to be most appropriate for those requests. House Bill 4545 does require, did create a statutory requirement for districts to create and stand up a grievance process specifically related to accelerated instruction. And any concerns that parents may have regarding the state requirement including the content of an accelerated learning plan or the provision delivery of that plan, can and should be addressed using that district's required grievance process. It is also important to note that schools should not be intentionally discouraging any student's participation in accelerated learning. We've mentioned a couple of times that the participation in accelerated learning for a student who otherwise requires it, it is their right under Texas Education Code to participate in that accelerated instruction. And we would take it very seriously in circumstances where school would be intentionally discouraging students or families from participating in something they would otherwise be required to receive. Another question we often receive from families specifically has to do with our students served by special education who participate in the STAAR Alternate 2 examination. This, of course, the STAAR Alternate 2 is a state assessment for students who are identified with significant cognitive disabilities. And the statute does have a couple of provisions that are important to note here around this question and considerations for students who do participate in the STAAR Alternate 2. So here in this circumstance, a student is eligible for participation in the alternate assessment. The ARD committee, of course, is still required to serve and act as the ALC in grades 3, 5, and 8, where that student is not successful in their on their reading or math assessment for that given year. In that circumstance, the student's ARD committee, as an ARD committee for a student who participates in the regular STAAR exam, would be required to convene and serve as an ALC. It's important here to note that the ALC requirements established in House Bill 4545 do apply for students who participate in the alternative assessment. The way that accelerated instruction is provided to that student can look a little bit different. There is, of course, as Colby described, the two options for providing accelerated instruction to students. That first option being the assignment of the student to the master exemplary or designated teacher. The second option, of course, being that supplemental instruction, the 30 hours per subject area. Our committees who are serving as ALCs for students who take the alternate assessment certainly should consider those two options. However, they are not limited to those two options in considering what accelerated instruction could look like for that student. There's a little bit more flexibility here. Our committees, in considering the manner in which that student will engage in accelerated learning, should be considering the student's strengths and needs that are described within the IEP. And again, they're not limited only to the option 1 and option 2 for accelerated instruction. There is the ability for that ARD committee to determine specifically what that accelerated instruction looks like based on the student's learning profile. Some students who participate in the alternate assessment exhibit what's considered no authentic academic response. In those circumstances, the committee, in thinking about accelerated instruction, may decide to focus on strategies that can support that student in being able to elicit an authentic academic response in the future. And finally, it's very important to note that for students who have serious medical needs, the Accelerated Learning Committee, and again, this is the students' ARD committee serving as the Accelerated Learning Committee, should always prioritize the health and safety of that student in any consideration that they are making around the provision of accelerated learning. Families often ask about students with disabilities who are receiving services in a homebound setting and how the accelerated instruction requirements under House Bill 4545 apply to students who may be receiving homebound services. And so the answer to the broader question, do these requirements apply if a student is receiving services in a homebound setting, is yes. The accelerated instruction requirements do apply for every student. In the situation or circumstance where a student is receiving services in a homebound setting, the ARD committee should consider and of course prioritize that student's health and safety. In certain cases, this may require actually pausing the accelerated instruction until such time that the student is able to return to campus to receive instruction or demonstrates their increasing ability to sustain prolonged participation in instruction or potentially could even receive supplemental instruction remotely rather than in person. So really the ARD committee is being very thoughtful around the health and safety of that student. And if that pause is required, then continue, of course, to provide the homebound services that that student would need. And in a circumstance where that student is later able to sustain prolonged participation in instruction or return to a campus, consider the delivery mechanism for providing that accelerated instruction at that time. Another very common question that we get from families as well as many folks in school districts as well is around students who are in high school in grades 9 through 12 who are served by special education and where they do not pass a STAAR end of course assessment or EOC assessment. And that student's ARD committee has determined that a passing score in that end of course assessment is not required for that student to graduate. So the question here is, if that is the case and the ARD committee has determined that the student is not required to pass a certain end of course assessment in order to graduate, but that student is not successful on that EOC, is accelerated instruction still required? So a couple considerations here. So ARD committees for students who are in grades 9 through 12 do have the ability to determine whether a student is required to achieve satisfactory performance on an end of course assessment in order to receive a high school diploma. In circumstances where an ARD committee has made this decision around a particular end of course assessment or subject area, the decision that the student is not required to pass that assessment in order to graduate does not waive the requirement for that student to receive accelerated instruction. That student continues to demonstrate that they have some academic needs related to that course area, that subject area, and therefore the accelerated instruction is still required. And the purpose of that accelerated instruction, of course, is to support the student's improved understanding of that tested subject area. In a circumstance where an ARD committee has determined that a student is not required to pass this end of course assessment in order to graduate from high school, the student would complete their accelerated instruction. If this is being done through the supplemental instruction avenue, that would be the 30 hours of supplemental instruction in that area. The student would complete those required hours, and then further discussions about a retake in that EOC would not apply given the ARD committee's decision. And in that circumstance, when the student is complete, they've completed their accelerated instruction requirement, no further accelerated instruction would apply at that point either. All right, well, we really appreciate everyone taking time out of your day to join us this afternoon. From those of us here at the TEA, we thank you for your partnership in the education of students served by special education. We do hope this information was helpful for you. If you should have further questions regarding anything covered in today's presentation or follow-up questions, you are welcome to submit those questions to us using the email address here on the slide, which is accelerated.instruction@tea.texas.gov. Again, we do hope this presentation was helpful, and thank you again for the opportunity to spend some time with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Jacob, Lisette, and Colby, so much for that information you shared on today. And as Jacob mentioned, any additional questions you may have, we will be taking those questions from the chat and the Q&A and sharing those with Jacob, Lisette, and Colby, the team, because it can be used to inform further development of resources. And also, Jacob provided the email address to send direct questions to. And Lisette has put a resource in the chat as well that has some accelerated learning resources. Thank you so much. Coming up in August, we will have another statewide webinar where our topic will be what is Child Find, and we will be providing information and tips for parents. So please be sure to mark your calendars. It's August 16th, this same time and place. At 12:15 Central Standard Time and at 1:15 in Spanish. Next slide, please. Stephanie.
I just want to thank everybody again for joining us today and remind you that if you need any assistance, you can reach out to us. Check out our website at prntexas.org and like and follow us on Facebook.
Thank you, Stephanie. Next slide, please. And we are SPEDTEX, the Special Education Information Center, again, a collaborative project between Region 10 and Texas Education Agency. We are here to serve families and educators and all those with an interest in serving students with disabilities, sharing information and resources to help address your concerns and needs. You're welcome to visit our website, www.spedtex.org. Give us a call, 877-773-3839. Email inquire@spedtech.org, as well as live chat with us on our website where you can interact with an expert to get the information and resources you need in real time. At this juncture, we are going to go to our next slide, and we are going to say thank you for joining us on today. We appreciate you taking your time to spend with us this afternoon, and please follow SPEDTEX on our social media sites, which are Facebook and Twitter, and reach out PRN SPEDTEX at any time, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you all so much, and you have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much, everyone. Great presentation. Appreciate your time.